Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I did earlier today uh, talked about Jewishness and me. It was occasioned by my having had the thought to come on and tell a few great Jewish jokes. And then I found myself feeling unaccustomedly reticent about doing such a thing because this is a moment where anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head, is one way of putting it. Uh, then I've decided that tell I'll tell a few Jewish jokes anyway because I'm I'm hoping I'm talking to people who are not infected with this piece of Western civilization and now more expanded that grows out of centuries of history that's kind of broken and so I'm an American boy. I was born in 1946, grew up in the American Midwest for the most part, uh, in the midst of very traditional American ethnicities. Went to high school with mostly Norwegians and Swedes and English, and but I had a year where I was also with Italian Americans and Irish Americans in high school too. So I feel there's no reason why we can't be the American melting pot that people used to envision, where something like the song "God Bless America" gets written by a Jewish immigrant, or I think it's Irving Berlin. So there's all there's all that that I love about America, that we've been able to weave the different cultures together in a way that are some of the best of each. I mentioned earlier about how the Jewish uh, the, back in the 50s when that America when I was a kid, we had Italian American singers, first generation, and Jewish American comedians, first generation. Um, so here we are, in America where ethnic differences are looking more problematic than that. Uh, so here are a few jokes that I kind of love, that that say something worth saying. So here's the first one. A rabbi is traveling around Eastern Europe from little village to little village, um, giving his presentation in some kind of a stand and deliver kind of way as a Jewish teacher to this Jewish village, um, and making, getting a place to sleep and fed by these villages as a way traveling itinerant teacher of Jewish things to Jewish communities. He makes the trip with the use of a driver who has got this little wagon, and the two of them schlep from village to village. The rabbi delivers his shtick, uh, fields questions from the people who have gathered around, and then they're off to the next village. I don't remember what the financial aspect of it was. So one time, the driver says to the rabbi, "Rabbi, every time we go to a village, everybody treats you with this great respect and appreciates it, listens to every word. And I'm just this schlemiel of a driver nobody pays any attention to. I've heard your speech so many times, I could deliver it word for word as well as you could. So this next village, just this once, can I change places with you? We go into the village, you act like you're the driver, I'm the rabbi." The rabbi agrees. I don't know why he agrees, but it's a funny story, so I'm glad he agrees. So they go to this new village, and sure enough, the driver, pretending to be the rabbi, gets up and delivers a speech. He does it actually better than the rabbi, and people are so impressed. And then there are questions about from the group, and that's what the Jewish process has always been: is to ask questions and seek answers. And like the heart of the Passover ceremony is the four questions that the youngest kid asks. So that's what's supposed to happen. So the crowd asks the driver these questions, and most of them he'd heard before. He'd heard how the rabbi dealt with it. But then this question, really, like a bolt out of the blue. It's a difficult question, an interesting question, one that shouldn't be ignored, but how to answer it. So the rabbi says, the driver, pretending to be the rabbi, says, well, I'm surprised that a person of your obvious intellect would ask a question as simple as that. Why, even my driver could answer that one. So, a little commentary from the joke teller. Logic seems to be one of the major dimensions of the whole Jewish humor thing. It's got to do with turning things into their opposites in a way through a kind of strange logic where what appears to be is really the opposite of what it is. I'm not sure exactly what the meaning of that is, but the fallibility of logic, the fact that you assume that that's the driver because he's pulling off the imitation of being the rabbi, lets this driver maintain the deception. It reminds me of another Jewish story, which I find a joke of sorts. It's not exactly to get laughs, but it gets a laugh of sorts. So in this story, there's the Jews are living in some other kingdom that's controlled by another power, rulers and the other people, and the evil advisor of the king wants to destroy the Jews. And I don't know why, but that kind of a figure is woven through Jewish history. There have been episodes. One of them leads to Purim. There's a guy. I'm told this isn't the right pronunciation. I'm told, but if it's what I was brought up with. Haman. There's a story. The Book of Esther tells that story, and then there's Hitler. And, there's a guy like that in this kingdom who wants to destroy the Jews, but doesn't have the authority to, but is good at getting the king to do what he wants him to do. The evil advisor to a not as evil king is the figure, and so the king resists the idea of just killing all the Jews, but he says, well, let's leave it to God. Let's have a drawing of out of the hat of either of two possibilities. Heads I win, tails, one will say that the Jews shall be spared, and one will say that the Jews will be all be slaughtered. And we'll leave it to God to determine which the fate will be. And that way we'll have, vetted it. And so they say, bring in the chief rabbi from the Jewish community to draw out of the hat which of these two options it will be. And between him, what he draws and what God decides, we'll know what to do. So The king, the rabbi comes in for at the appointed time to do the drawing, and he knows what kind of dude he's dealing with in this guy who's setting up this drawing. He knows, and he's right, that this guy is not going to leave it to chance. He's not going to let God decide. He's determined to destroy the Jews. So he puts into the hat or whatever the drawing will take out of. He puts in two things, both of which say the Jews will be destroyed. And but the rabbi, clever, the clever Jew image, the rabbi recognizes the stratagem that he faces. And he knows he's going to turn things around and put to his advantage what he knows that the other guy is going to do to try to cheat and win. He's going to turn certain victory into certain defeat. So when the time comes for the drawing, the chief rabbi reaches into the hat, pulls out a piece of paper, pops it in his mouth, and swallows it. And what are you doing? What are you doing? So he says, well, that's the one I choose. As for what it says, we can infer that from what it says in the one that's left in the hat, because obviously it's the opposite. So I don't know. There's also an element of the survivor being cleverer than the one who wants to kill him. And it reminds me of the Uncle Remus stories of Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. And Brer Rabbit is the weak one, whose life is always being threatened. And Brer Rabbit outsmarts those that want to eat him. And that's what the chief rabbi does here. He doesn't have any power. The power is in the hands of the king, and the king is partially in the hands of this one who wants to destroy the Jews. So it requires cleverness, like the Tar Baby, where the rabbit uses the strength of the one that would eat him to get him stuck and defeat him, like to throw him into the briar patch, to outsmart. I bet that wherever you find people who have been really at the mercy of the power of others, you'll find that the figure of the trickster, the one who survives by being smarter, is universally to be. My guess is you'd find it. I don't know what gypsy humor is like, but I bet there's some version of that. Anyway, I'd be interested. Let's see. The idea that what we think is real isn't what's real seems to be in there. Let me give a couple of examples of stories that I like. So it's Yom Kippur, and it's the most solemn day in the Jewish year. By the way, I'm not religiously Jewish. I'm culturally Jewish. But the stories a lot of the stories revolve around the religion. So here's it's Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Jews are supposed to atone for all the sins they've committed in the last year. It's a time for humility and repentance and the achievement of a clean slate with the intention of keeping it clean. So it's the little village, and the village has got this rich merchant, and it's got this head of the synagogue, and they are the primary characters of the highest status figures in the community. And so they go into the synagogue, and they go down the middle. And the richest merchant in town goes down, throws himself on the floor, says, "Oh God, forgive me for my sins." Pounds his chest, tears his clothes. I don't know what all he does, but he says, "I am nothing. I am nothing." It's a time of deep humility. And then he goes and sits in his place, his pew, and his place in the synagogue, in the front row, I suppose. And then the president of the synagogue, or whoever the leader of the synagogue is, he comes down and he throws himself on the floor and goes through the same routine with the chest beating and all this stuff, and saying at the end, "Oh Lord, I am nothing. I am nothing." Then there comes in through the shul a little nobody, a shlamil, but he's been aware of what the other guys did, so he figures, all right. So he comes down through the middle of the synagogue, and he throws himself on the floor and goes through the whole shlamil, whatever. I forget what. And he concludes by saying, "Oh Lord, I am nothing." Meanwhile, over on one of the pews where the rich merchant and the head of the synagogue are sitting together, the merchant leans over to the head of the synagogue and he says, "Look who thinks he's nothing." Well, that breaks my wife and me up. It's a line that we use. Look who thinks he's nothing. What appears to be and what it is are opposites. This is being nothing has become, the badge of status. So there's another example of that. My kids are very impatient with me because I treat some jokes or some punchlines as if there's never too many repetitions of them. So Mrs. Goldberg has Mrs. Rosenberg over for tea and cookies. And they're having a nice time together. They're sitting together and they're talking and drinking tea and eating cookies. And then the hostess, I can't remember which one. I think Mrs. Goldberg was the one, so the hostess. And she offers Mrs. Rosenberg, "Have some more cookies." And Mrs. Rosenberg says, "Oh, I couldn't. I've already had 3. And Mrs. Goldberg says, "You've had 4, but who's counting?" Laughter is something you have to do in a group, I suppose. Anyway, I've always loved that story, and that it really. She says who's counting, but she's contradicting. The situation is really not the one that she's describing. It's very different. I don't know what that's exactly about, but it also does have something in common with that whole business about logic. That if I eat one, you're going to have to infer what I ate from what's left. And you're going to reach the wrong conclusion because the one I ate didn't say what it said. It said, it's a situation. Anyway, I think you can probably see the pattern here. So there's another story, which I don't really connect with the others. Maybe I'm just not seeing it in the context, but it's another story I really like. I think it captures something, I'm sure it captures something about the nature of Jewish culture. But I think it's more like a human universal too. And here it is. So a Jew gets washed up on an island in the South Pacific. Think Tom Hanks' situation in Castaway. And it's a place where nobody sees him. The ships don't go by, and considerable length of time goes by without his being discovered. But he makes himself a life on that island, But eventually, a ship does come in and see that there are structures on the island, and so there must be somebody, and it's an uncharted island or whatever. Certainly supposed to be uninhabited, and a boarding party comes ashore and to see what's going on there in terms of human needs and situation. And they discover this guy who's been there for a few years, and they see these two huts, and they offer to rescue him, and he's happy to be rescued. And they say, well, tell me, this building over here that you obviously you built it. What is that for? He says, oh, that's the synagogue. But there's another building right off to the side. It looked very much the same, and it just sat there, looking like building number two. And so the head of the boarding party asked the man they're rescuing, and what is that building? That one over there. And he says, that's the synagogue I don't go to. Anyway, I told that joke to a Mennonite woman who said, let me tell you a Mennonite joke. And she said, this person dies and goes to heaven. St. Peter takes them in and he's going to show them around. And they come to this very high wall, and they hear the sound of people singing hymns and stuff like that. But they don't go the other side of that wall. And so the newly dead person asks St. Peter, what's going on over there? And he said, that's the Mennonites. They think they're the only ones here. So, all right. Well, I hope you enjoyed those Jewish jokes and, the commentary of the way I think about them. The thing about logic is that the whole intellectual process of interpreting texts, it's sort of at the center of the Jewish life. So, from the time they were kicked out of Palestine 2,000 years ago onward, is to examine texts and to extract from them truth and understanding. And so the technique of doing that involves the application of a certain kind of logic. The whole thing is based on the idea of through logic we will arrive at truth. And there's a lot that it gets accomplished that way. But it is also, like everything human, got its dimensions of failure. And these jokes that turn logic on their head call attention, I think, to the human frailty, to the ability of people to deceive themselves, to the ability of logic to lead you into error. So I think that the humor that calls that is a kind of a critique of the culture. It's a way of saying, yeah, there are some strengths here. Some good gets accomplished, but don't mistake what you're doing for perfection. Don't imagine that you know all the truth with a capital T. Okay, those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.